personally, like from a very relatively young age, I either got called or felt a call or whatever to explore consciousness within myself. And I've been very fortunate to have found myself in some excellent places to do that.
Welcome in to Menfolk Journeys, the podcast of great conversations with men. I'm your host, Chris Foster, and we're going to explore how we wear this beautiful and confusing mantle of manhood in the 21st century. Look, I get it. In public life, a lot of men are knuckleheads. But in private life, we can be thoughtful and we can be reflective if we have the right conversation, if we feel comfortable talking about our story. And we all have a great story to tell. And we can all learn from those stories. We can learn about who we've been, who we are, and who we want to be. And that's why we're going to have this conversation, so we can learn from other men just like us. And that's why we're going to talk with my friend Michael. You know, there's this idea of having past lives, right? Buddhist and Hindu and other religions have precepts of you live a life and you pass and you move on to the next life. And maybe your deeds had good karma to move you to a higher form of life the next time you go around, and kind of moving towards a sense of enlightenment. Some people believe that, some people don't. But I think we could all agree that we all have different lives in this life. Right? When someone says, oh, that was a life-changing event, it's because your life changed. You changed. You have a new life, different than it was before. And sometimes some of us are really aware of these different lives in this life, and they're even aware of something more that they could be. You're going to love this conversation. I'm glad you're here. Welcome in to Menfolk Journeys. Well, Michael Rosenthal, welcome in.
Thanks, Chris. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm glad I can join you on one of your maiden voyages. Is that the right thing to say, maiden on menfolk? Menfolk maiden voyages. That's weird, but okay, let's go with it.
We'll go with it.
Thank you for having me.
That's totally fine. So, Michael, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, other than a longtime friend of yours, I think you always say we met in the fourth grade. I don't have any recollection of meeting you. I just feel like I've always known you. So
I'll get to that later.
All right. Well, I take it back. None of that is true. I grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I came out originally to Arizona in '88 for about a year and a half. I went back to Pennsylvania, then I went to LA, and then I went to New York. Then I came back out to Arizona, where I've kind of been. Now there's a couple in the world who are smaller versions of me that look similar. Been married. I'm currently, I guess I'm technically married still, but we're not like really married, but it's cool. I have a close relationship. I have three of my own. I have two step, and I work in marketing. And I don't know. I think that's kind of the superficial overlay that most people that encounter me kind of get from a day-to-day perspective. That's the mask that I wear.
Awesome.
That's
I like
me.
that. So I'll reference what you mentioned earlier about us knowing each other in the fourth grade, and that is true. I met you in fourth grade. I was a new school for me, and you are the longest friend I've had in my life. So you were one of the first friends that I met in fourth grade, and we met each other, and I didn't know it at the time, and I didn't have a phrase for it, and you introduced me to the phrase more recently. But we were best of friends, fourth to sixth grade-ish. Middle school hit, we were still friends, but not like tight friends. High school hit, we were in our circle and we were great friends, but not great, tight friends. But we kind of bumped into each other in and out. And then we both graduated from high school and poof, gone.
Yeah.
And I didn't see you for decades. And then through LinkedIn, we connected, and you said, hey, Foster, I'm coming out to San Diego on a business trip. You're still there? And I'm like, yeah, of course I am. Let's do it. And
That's
so
right.
you came out. I met you at one stupid ass business hotel. And I was like, all right, we're going to do some tacos and beer. And when I saw you, it was like I had not been distant from you. And you said a phrase to me that I'm going to throw in. And I didn't know it when I was in fourth grade because you kind of feel it, but you don't have the vocabulary. But you are a mohotar.
Yeah, a million years of life.
A
That's
million years of life.
something that's a old kingdom, ancient Egyptian expression, like a toast or something. It might very well be the oldest toast known to humanity. Maybe there's others. I just don't know what they are. So I like to say it's that, but it's definitely, predates, probably biblical history in that regard, and it is a Moharsar. And what's interesting is you could see it depicted in a hieroglyph. It's a hieroglyph, and you see kind of a kneeling person, kind of a man, god, deity, person, figure. We'll just say it's a figure. It's a hieroglyph, and kneeling, and then he's got two arms held wide, whatever, and it equates to a million years of life.
I
So
love
whenever
it.
you see that reference, that's what that is.
Well, I love about that too. And when you told me it was kind of like my friend for 1,000 years. And when I saw you and we started to talk, it was as if the decades melted away. And you
Yeah.
were the friend that I saw and connected with in fourth grade. And there are some people in our life that are a mohotar where you're like, oh my God, you are connected to me. And what I love about your imagery that you just said about someone kneeling with the arms open, the reason that's, I think, so apropos is we started to talk and do some bullshit and yik yak, and we're both Steelers
Hmm.
fans and Mike Tomlin fans. So we talked about that. And then we started to have our first beer and we gave a toast. And then you said, so, Foster, what's important to you? And that was the most beautiful question I'd heard from someone like you, because it unlocked and opened up my ability to tell you where I was in that moment and who I had become in the decades that separated our last meeting. And
Yeah.
so your imagery now of having
Right.
someone kneeling with their arms open, that's a mohotar. My arms are
Yeah,
open.
because I guess to kneel in that sense is to submit to the moment. It's not an aggressive posture. You can't possibly defend yourself when you're kneeling. You're completely um, you relax. There's just nothing you could do. So you've submitted. Your arms are open. So you're open. Your heart is open. So it's a great posture to take, and it's a great association with that. So you accept what is. So when you ask that question, I guess, what is important to you? I mean, I guess foundationally, like you're still you. Like I met like who is more us than we are when we're children. Now, we can get into this a little bit, I guess, while we have this conversation, because I get the sense, and this may be something that would be interesting to talk about a little bit, but I've gotten a sense, like throughout life, that there's not just one in there. And not to sound like, I don't mean, my
Uh-huh.
ex studied forensic psychology, and she's like, well, she used to explain it like this. She's like, well, there's not multiple personality disorder, but you can certainly have multiple personality disorders. I don't mean that when I say it. Not like, oh, I got a bunch of people talking to me, whatever. But there's this distinction you'll see in a lot of religions and stuff that I've looked at over time. Like if you look at the bar mitzvah and within the Jewish religion and whatever, there's this like, or whether it's it's what is it? When the I just can't remember the name, but it's like when a 15-year-old like Hispanic
Quinceanera?
girl, quinceanera, like all around these times, we're celebrating something. Like, why is that age around there, kind of puberty, adolescence being like celebrated? And it's always like this like ceremony. It's like whatever. But then if you remove all the stuff from it, you kind of look at what you're going through there. And there's a couple of things that stand out, most of which is you become obsessed with like horniness and sex. Like right then, your
Right.
innocence is gone and nobody did anything to you. And it's not just a change in you physiologically, that's like secondary. I mean, we pay the most attention to that. but it's this yearning and like all this desire for a bunch of stuff that you didn't want before. So it's almost as though another has joined you. You're
Right.
this innocent child, then you reach this age, and then everybody like has these weird ceremonies depending on what faith you ascribe to or what like group you hang out in. But they're all kind of saying like somebody else joined, and then your life becomes this kind of dialogue between the two, and they depicted with the angel and the devil, and
Mm-hmm.
like you get all these like our whole life becomes this chaotic dance between these two yous that are like jockeying back and forth for pole position. And we can get a little bit deeper into that because I think
Oh,
it's going to be a fun conversation.
absolutely. So I've got a question for you then. I'm going to ask you the question that you asked me now. You
All
ready
right, go
for it?
ahead. I'm sorry. Yeah,
You're
go
good.
ahead.
What is important to you?
Remember that thing when Curly holds his finger up in City Slickers? He's like, this one thing. And he describes this woman that's in a field and he watches her stretch. And Billy Crystal's like, what? That was it. And he's like, yeah. And I loved her. He's like, you didn't go up to her? He's like, nah, this. And I think that's a beautiful, grand metaphor, but I'm not going to get into it because I want to spend all our time, breaking down the metaphor in City Slickers, which wasn't that riveting from the beginning. It was funny, but like I don't think it's like this deeply moving kind of spiritual journey. It was good. Okay, sorry, City Slickers. But I think I had to be maybe this age, and I would have answered it differently, so I wouldn't know. And I'm
Right.
sure maybe in 10 years I'll answer this differently again. But I think I got vapor lock or whatever they use in Star Wars or Trek or whatever. I got a lock on it.
Mm-hmm.
The answer is only this. And if your answer isn't this, you're either younger than we are, or you came out, you got off the track, or I don't know where you are, but and I don't mean to sound so definitive, but there's only one thing. There's only one thing that should matter, and and it's enlightenment. That's the
Mm.
only reason that you should be here. It's the only thing you can be doing that has any value. You got to figure yourself out, and you got to get to where these like sages of like the ancient order rose into. Like they did. Like there's this thing. Everybody's got these cultures and these stories of these mortals that rose into like God form. Like, what the fuck else could you be doing? Like, getting laid, partying. I am now the executive vice president. It's all bullshit. None of it matters. It's stupid. It's all boring. Anybody, I love my job. You're lying. You like the beach. You like to sit on the beach with beautiful whatever you're attracted to, dancing around and pig roasts and like surfing and like that's what you love. You do. That's what you love. Everybody loves that shit. That's great. I love my job. Go fuck yourself. No, you don't. You're lying to me. Like, and that's how I feel about it. Like, I do jobs and I don't hate them. Like, I like to write somewhat, but like, given like, you can go skimboard all day or you can write poetry. I'll skimboard every
Right.
time. Like, why would I not? Like, it's stupid not to. But behind that is this experiential connection to life. Like, to experience all that life has to offer. Like, why are we into women? They're fascinating and we like how they look. What is it about museums and art? Like, it just draws you in. All these experiences draw you in.
Mm-hmm.
But why?
I think what's
Why are we?
interesting, maybe it moves you forward. So last night, we saw there's a concert series in San Diego called The Art of Elan, and they have these esoteric groups come in. And last night, it was a remarkable experience. We saw the Jack Quartet. If you Google Jack Quartet, they're one of the nationally renowned quartets. And the New York Times says the most important quartet in America. That's fine. That's great. But I had never experienced anything like them before. Their musicality, their detail, the deft precision by which they handle their instruments. And it's just a viola, two violins, and a cello. And it was a small, intimate room. And I don't know if I was there for 2 hours or 2 months, or 2 years.
You just went and just brought
It
you in, huh?
was it was this emotional, artistic experience with of complete attention to what they were doing and how they were doing it. They were giving to the audience. The audience was, like you mentioned, enraptured with the art. And it's one of those things where you talk about the only thing that's important to you right now is enlightenment. There are so many ways in which you can be revealed to the great goodness, right? And art is one of those ways. And last night, it's so funny you
Oh,
mentioned that,
sure.
because that was at that time, Michael. You ask what's important to us, of course, our family, blah, blah, blah. But at that time, in that moment, that was what was important. That
Yeah.
moment.
Now, was that like you weren't like what like spoke to you about it was like just the frequency where you were just kind of in this altered state, like
Yes,
we're like
the harmonics
yeah.
of the instrument, I think, touched into us, but more so than that, not just the harmonies, but the
Were
unexpected
you
ways that they use the instruments to create a sounds and experiences and melodies that I'd never heard before.
well, I know you like you were always like a talented artist when I'm sure you still are. I just you don't draw for me anymore. But when we were kids, you used to draw really cool shit that I would be
Uh-huh.
like, wow, I wish and I'd pretend I could draw that stuff, but I couldn't. It was frustrating, but good for you. Um, but like you're an imaginative guy, always have been. So when you're there listening to the quartet, are you are you off in your imagination? Like, were you seeing scenes like before you that might not have actually been in front of you? Or were you just so like
I was doing
brought
my
into the moment and
Yeah.
present, like you're watching like their fingers and the motion of
Hmm.
the music and that's where you were at?
I was really trying
Or
hard
was
to
it like,
in and
yeah,
out, in and out, right? So
okay,
anyone who's done any kind of transcendental meditation knows it's tough. Thoughts fly in, thoughts fly out.
yeah,
That was an opportunity for a meditation of sorts. And some
yeah.
thoughts, stray thoughts would come in, and I'd be like, "F you, get the fuck out of here. I'm
Yeah,
here.
well, you
I'm
have to
present.
like shut up. Yeah.
Yeah, shut up."
Did you
And so
fantasize about being one of the musicians in the
no,
quartet
I
at
didn't
any
do that
time?
because there's
Like,
no way I
you
could.
didn't. You were like you didn't like if I was up there, I would have the. What would you have been the viola or like were you a violin? Like when you had your like I wish I could strum moment. I would
No,
have. My ego would have risen up in me, and I would have
right?
been. I would have. I'd be like, if this were me,
That's interesting. So I've got a good
yeah.
question for you then. Your ego rises up, and we talked you touched on it earlier, and I talk about it in the preamble where many cultures throughout the world have this precept of multiple lives, right?
Hmm.
And but I think everyone would agree that people have multiple lives even within this life. So if you don't think that you have multiple lives and you think this is your only go round, people do think that, oh yeah, I've changed. And people throughout, colloquial conversation just say, oh, that was a life changing event. Well, your freaking life changed. Like you changed lives in your
Right.
life changing event, right?
Sure.
You have a
Yeah.
different life. So talk to me about your thoughts on those different lives within this life.
Well, I think. I mean, I would say that most of my adult life, well, I wouldn't say most of my adult life. Most of my adult life has been arrogantly aware of that dialogue that I felt like I was involved in, but I was Rip Van Winkling for about 20 years. And I really wasn't giving it the time that it deserved. Um, I followed my ego and my mask, and it became who I was. And I had a very lovely marriage with a very lovely girl who was also not unlike me in this regard. So I think we created like this fictitious bubble. Then everything was just great because like we could just kind of like will stuff like to like that we had, and I mean like it was kind of I would say that personally, like from a very relatively young age, I either got called or felt a call or whatever to explore consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
within myself. And I've
Mm-hmm.
been very fortunate to have found myself in some excellent places to do that. But part of it, I think, or it's either I lack discipline or because you just have to go live your earthly life to realize it, it's just like bullshit on like it's like the part of town that has all like the car dealerships and you just keep going through it and through it like how many like oh I got a Lexus I got a Lexus I have a Lexus so what I think the point is life it's that conversation we had earlier. It's that guy or that girl, and this is a men folk journey, but the girls go through it too. I'm afraid they're also
Mm-hmm.
human like us, but different. And we could talk about that a little bit too, but or at least not like. And I don't mean to come off like I'm this sagely guru. I'm not. It's the antithesis of that. These are just my observations. Like
Yep.
this is just stuff or conversations I have with also observant people and stuff that's just come up, and we can get a little bit into my experience in that regard too. I don't know how much time we have. Like I've lived this whole life, and we're trying to talk about menfolk journeys in these explosive moments, and maybe we can concentrate on that. But that might not be a bad idea.
Mm-hmm.
But I think like I went through this relationship, and we have some children, and they're awesome, and like I have what a child from like a previous and that was the horrible like one of those nightmare scenarios with the really bad person and like it's a nightmare but then this time like it was a really beautiful relationship and it still is we're just not
Sure.
together the same way anymore but like we were texting today and like trying to figure out Mother's Day and it's like well do you want the little one for this or whatever I don't know I was like well and then I'll take and she was like well I could take our daughter but then she's expensive I was like well if you want that could be your Mother's Day gift and I'll send you cash and you can take them to breakfast or whatever she's like oh that's sweet okay yeah so we're fine
You're
it's
working it
not
through.
like this yeah it's cool like it's different but we're different like I don't I mean I've been through like an earthly chaotic hell ride and this is like kind of a conscious person and I am too and she's just on a different set of tracks than I am right now and then I'm not judging her tracks she has great tracks I've got my own tracks and it's just that
Sure.
they're just different right now and I'm sure we'll be able to get together and compare notes like in some time but
And
the
and
journeys are difficult
the journeys are difficult. And when you're with somebody and you go through these multiple lives, sometimes you don't go through multiple lives in sync. Someone goes through
no
a
you
change of
don't
life and someone else goes through another change in life.
for
And
sure.
then, that's where a lot of the complications in relationships come. We'll be right back. All right, Michael, I want to touch on something you just talked about where you had a Rip Van Winkle. Clearly, you implied that you've got moments in time when you had been sleeping. And when you set up in our conversation, you wrote something really powerful and referencing people and you being asleep. I'd like you to read that.
Okay. Well, I think when I started writing, I was kind of and I'm going to read it, Chris. I know you want me to read it, but I think when I said when I started writing this, I was just kind of like brainstorming aloud. But I'll help
Mm-hmm.
qualify all of this. But I'll read it now. And what I wrote here was, and whenever I say anything about most everyone, I include myself. I've come to the realization that most of the world is completely asleep. And I hope that maybe our time together on the show, delivered in truth and humility, may be felt by others who have faced similar feelings, but have been scared to utter them, or for fear that they'd be left abandoned, or somehow judged, or actually seen as being unfit to operate within the playbook that we've been handed.
Yeah. The question is, but why and who handed us that playbook?
Yeah. Yep. And must we accept it? And are things always the way that they are now? And could we be nearing, like, in a big, not just a personal life change, but in a big, like, cosmic, our species life change, like nearing a big cataclysmic, cataclysmic is the wrong word, a big
So the
significant
question that I have
change
for you,
on the
Michael, is
horizon.
who handed us that
And,
playbook to live? Because one of the things that I've talked to my young
you
children
know,
about is so there's no one way to live, right? You don't have to go on a track of high school and college and
that's
job
right.
and grub and job and career and then retire. You don't have to do that. I know people who've abandoned everything and went in a van to live. I know folks who traveled the world. I know folks who took gap year. I know people who just changed a variety of ways. And so there's no playbook. And who handed us that playbook?
Well, here's the thing. With like those styles of life, the foundation upon which all of those are built are all like mind things. Like, I am not going to go to work. I am a traveler, and I'm a road person. I work from the road, and I don't have children, or like all this stuff is just different iterations of the same. And I mean that in the sense that we are living in a construct that was set here somehow, and we're buying into it. Whether you're like, I'm a free man and I don't play by the rules, and you drive 87 on the highway, or whether you're like, I drive 55 and screw you, and that's the rules, and all of them are buying into this version of reality. But and an old friend who's no longer with us, but he is, which is another conversation, used to say to me, reality is a ball of clay, meaning this construct is in place right now, but the whole thing can be turned on its head. It's just all of it uprooted with a whole different everything. So, I mean, some people might have put some stuff in place that kind of keeps people at bay, and we can live in this, and it's not bad. It is, and it's life, and there's so much beauty here. So it's not to say that it's not good enough. But you said something interesting that really like appealed to my sense, because I was just having this conversation earlier today with somebody else, and
Uh-huh.
I'll give you his name at the end of this conversation so you can continue the dialogue. But you were saying something to the nature of like, nobody can really, there's not just one way to live. You were telling your daughter that, and you're so right. And what I think is important is, okay, you're who you are. You're Chris Foster, and I've known you since fourth grade. So we got together, and it was still the two of us. I mean, I look much better than anybody would possibly imagine. I'm just teasing.
You look
Over all the
older.
years, yeah, I look older. You still look great. But my point being, so
Right.
we're still foundationally those two people. But we've gone through so many changes and experiences and gained so much wisdom and had heartbreaks and disasters and maybe a couple moments of
Yes.
triumph. You're like,
Mm-hmm.
hey, yeah, I did something great. And then like the next day you're like, oh, I get my ass kicked again, or whatever. It's life. So you have these journeys and you have these recognitions, but the beauty of it is, whether you're like locked into somebody else's like dream, which I think we are,
Sure.
and that's not necessarily a bad thing. Like, I'm saying these things without judgment. But also, there's the thought that this pursuit of this sagely wisdom that I believe is available to all of us if we open our hearts and
Mm-hmm.
get on bended knee.
And
Namo
accept it and
tar, like,
receive it.
and you get in there. You can. There's nothing. Yes, there's nothing different about any of these
Right.
folklore mythological heroes in us. What could they possibly? How could they be differently alive? They're not. You're alive or you're not alive. But how many dimensions can you
Right.
access within this experience? Like, have you maxed out the fun meter? Are you living on this in this programmed, like, look at that? You've seen it everywhere. Like, the Matrix like depicted this like situation. Then everyone's like, oh, we're all in a simulation. Like, yeah and no. Like,
Right. And you talk about the stories, right? You talk about the stories of the hero with a thousand faces, the Joseph Campbell, treatise, and you talk about stories from Gilgamesh to Ralph from The Greatest American Hero, which was such a kooky show in the 1980s, but he had a journey too, and you're
yeah,
right. There's no difference between the stories of those mythological figures than the stories that we're going through. And I would think that it's probably also why, James Joyce
no,
wrote Ulysses, right? I mean, the idea of someone in a single day going through an odyssey that one of the greatest literary heroes ever went through just through a day. I think that that's true, and but we never think about that day, right? I don't think that most of us believe that we're the heroes of our own story, but think about their lives as a story.
yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. Like, yeah, and one of the things I couldn't help but think about, well, you were talking about, Ulysses and that journey within a day. I remember, like, immediately it
Right.
conjured this thought of Narnia, and where these kids go into this wardrobe, and they're there for like lifetimes, and then they're back out of the wardrobe, like, we're back, we made it, and they're like, they're
Mm-hmm.
gone like a half hour, nobody cared. So the whole idea that within consciousness, there's so many levels and dimensions that you are available to us if we unencumber ourselves from our tethers to conventional belief. So, like, I don't think that C.S. Lewis was necessarily BSing. Like, I think we presuppose like a lot of things,
Right.
like, oh, what a grandiose story. No, no. Ulysses went on this journey in a day. Was Ulysses in his bathtub in a meditative state and entered his imagination and went on this entire
Sure.
lifetime
Maybe.
of journeys in a day? Maybe. But was it less real? Was it less real for the kids who went into the wardrobe? No. That's it.
That's right. It's what I love about that idea of it being less real or not real and what that real is. I'm a big Harry Potter fan. One of my favorite lines at the end when Harry, spoiler alert, if you should have read or seen Harry Potter. So anyway, after he quote unquote dies, he's talking to Dumbledore in the station and he said, was this real or was it all in my head? Um, and Dumbledore says, well, of course it's in your head. Doesn't mean it's not
Right.
real, right? And there's this moment where I was mentioning the Jack Quartet last night, and there's this place you go to, like I said, where time stopped, and it was a meditative state of sound and an experience. And you know, what about you, Michael? And you mentioned that you've had some of these shocking, lightning strike changes. Have you gone into meditative states where you've reached places that you hadn't been
Yeah.
before?
Yes. Yes, I have. And I was in, and this is like one of those lightning strike things. Like, I was kind of I mean, you knew me. I was kind of this like strange kid, and but
Hmm.
like I kind of owned it. Like I didn't own it. Like outwardly, I didn't own it, but I was like, it kind of is what I was, and I fancied myself like unique or whatever. But I think I wanted it so bad, or I remembered it so much that the essence of who I was returned to me, and like, I don't want to say reflections because that'd be it would be a disservice to those people who've shown me so much, and obviously they're real. And if anybody's a reflection, like, it would be me, not them. But also it's how it
Hmm.
works, and it doesn't really matter. It's just the minute you try to articulate that, once you've committed it to words and language, the emotion of like the recognition of self, like in this cosmic blaze, becomes confounded. And that's one of the beautiful things, because you have to go on this journey alone. In fact, um, one of the people who illustrated it to me did it through Tolkien, and I think this will help.
Hmm.
And I had this kind of moment And then I came back down and went to sleep again. And then I just recently just
Hmm.
popped my head back out, and I still fortunately have some of those people that are available to me, and they're like, all right, dude, can you please just finish the journey, because you need to be
Sure.
participating now when you're still dicking around, basically, is the conversation. But it's okay. But they're like, that's okay, like but it is okay, but it's also like, but, you know it wouldn't kill you, like,
Let's
yeah.
get on with it.
So but anyway,
Let's get on with it.
we were talking, we were in New York, and it's probably like 1994, 90, maybe 95. And got to a conversation, and he was talking about Tolkien. It's that scene where Bilbo, they're lost in the forest, and they're like, they just don't know where they are. They're, what is it, Mirkwood, and it's terrifying. And they're like, well, the thief, he's the guy who has to climb the tree and figure out who we are. And Bilbo is like, sucks it up, and he's terrified, but he's like, doesn't want to like look bad for all the dwarves, because he really hasn't done shit the whole time, whatever. So he's
Right.
like, nah. So he climbs a tree, and the way Tolkien writes it is and I'm paraphrasing or like misquoting a paraphrase. It's been years since I've reread that, but it's still one of the most beautifully delivered literary moments in literature history, just for this reason. So he climbs up this tree,
Okay.
and he pokes his head up, and out above the canopy, and he's drenched in sunlight, and everywhere above the treetops, and there's the sun shining, and there's butterflies are everywhere, and he's in heaven. He doesn't tell you. I mean, Tolkien doesn't give you that he's in heaven to explain it all, but
Sure.
he's like overwhelmed by like this moment of grace. But it was always like there. It never left. It was always there. And he has this commentary where he's like, I wish I could call the others up to join me, but essentially, like, he makes this thing like, there's some moments that a man must
Right.
experience like alone, and then he
Alone.
goes back down, because he knows where they are now, so he's like, all right, come on, we'll go this way or whatever.
Right.
And then he too, like in the story, kind of goes back to sleep. And you do, but you don't
Sure.
have to. Like, you can stay there,
Right.
you can learn that pathway back up that tree, and you can go there, and it's a different place. And it's the place that Ulysses went. It's the place that Lewis went, and it's a place that Tolkien goes. It's a place that Dr. Seuss goes. What would you do if you saw a Jabu? Everyone's like, ah, that's
That's
funny.
right.
It's a Jabu.
This Buddhist concept of bodhisattva, where someone who achieves enlightenment but then decides to return back and do the works within the world.
But I think that's it.
Right.
Not everybody does. I mean, maybe they don't. And
Sure.
I have no gauge. I've never reached enlightenment, but I
Hmm.
know maybe a dude or two. And when I say that,
Yeah.
they're the only
And what's
ones.
funny is that, when we talk about faiths and philosophies and the like, I had this thought, and I wanted to share it with you and ask you about this. So there's religion, which is big, right? The Muslim religion, Jewish religion, Christian religion, millions of people in
Mhm.
religions. And then there's a church, right? In Tierra
Mhm.
Santa, it's, Ascension Catholic Church. In Pittsburgh goes East Liberty Lutheran Church, right? So the religion is this big groupings of millions of people that kind of ascribe to a certain faith. The church is more local. It's more communal, right? It's my neighbor, it's my families, it's where I can have daycare, it's where I've got school, and it kind of builds a smaller community of people that you live with every day. And then there's faith. And like you get to the top of the tree and you're alone.
Mhm.
That's it. You're the only one who knows your own faith. And so for some people, there's an alignment of religion and church and faith. For a lot of people, there isn't. And so I was thinking about faith because it is alone. And one analogy that I was thinking of was, imagine you've got these elementary school students, because I taught art for elementary schools. I volunteered in my kids' class one time, and several times, right, for a whole year. And so here's what I know to be true about kids and adults. If you give every adult a set of colored pencils, let's say you got 10 adults in a room, and you're putting them in front of a sunflower, and you say, here are colored pencils. You draw the sunflower. They draw the sunflower. And then they all put their sunflowers on the wall. all sunflowers are going to be different. They're going to look different, right? Even though the sunflower itself is the same, everybody's drawing of the sunflower is going to be different. And even though they had all the same tools, the same colored pencils, etc., it's very different. And then you say, okay, well, everyone come in the room together and draw that same sunflower. They might look at each other's sunflower and then steal some ideas and, oh, that one's better than mine. I'm going to adjust my, oh, that sucks. I'm going to do, and then suddenly, but still, in the end of the day, your sunflower is going to look different. Why isn't that the same with faith, where at the end, Bilbo goes to the top of the tree and you've got to experience that alone, right?
Well, I think he was speaking specifically about not just the way that he experiences the world, because you can do that in company, you can discuss ideas. But that moment of release, that moment of submission, that moment of recognition that the journey into enlightenment doesn't happen
Right.
outside of you, but it happens within. That's yours. There's nobody can be there with you. You might realize that there is nobody else, and it's all an extension of you. Like, I don't know, but maybe that's what you get, or maybe it's how to handle the recognition that it's just you,
Right.
but it's also everybody. And how do you reconcile that? And that whole emotional recognition of that all at once, where you're like, am I doing this? No, of course not. Is everybody all doing this? And you're like,
right.
And you can't express it in words. So that's why, was it going to call them up and show them? Like, they'd see the trees or whatever. They wouldn't. What's happening right now is my daughter keeps sending me this text. Can you send me $12? But we're going to put her on hold. She's going to live without her $12. She's going to have one of those extreme experiences of life right now where she can't have the $12. And we're going to see maybe enlightenment could result, maybe the complete decay of modern society.
That's
Like, who knows?
hilarious.
Who knows what could happen to her? I will tell you this. She scares me because she shares a birthday with Benito Mussolini and Joan of Arc. And if you met her, you would understand, like, oh, that's exactly who she stares. So I'm like nervous for my own well-being with the $12.
Yeah, she's channeling those past lives into herself. That's awesome. We'll be right back. All right. So you just said that your daughter was texting about the $12. So here's what I do know about you. You've got a younger child and an older child, and you were a younger parent with a young child, and now you're an older parent with a young child.
Yes.
So how are you a different parent now than you were then?
When I was a younger parent, I wasn't really young, but I was immature. So I was probably like 30 or 29 or 30 with my first. And now I'm, 53 going on 54. And my little one just turned 6.
Mm-hmm.
And it's completely different. You could get into genetics and like maybe my youthful virility was put into my firstborn, and then that energy or whatever will be her strength. And then the younger one gets kind of more of the gift of awareness and consciousness, but maybe none of that's true. I don't know. But and don't get me wrong, like, I've loved that. One of the things I really have liked about my sleeping part of my journey, and now not so much, because now I'm like kind of watching myself be a parent, like with some degree of like consciousness and some awareness put to it. Before, like, my first one was like terror, like, and I was in a bad relationship and it was just stress. And I love my kid and we'd have fun, but beyond that, it's really uncomfortable. Life was outside that father-daughter bond.
Mm-hmm.
Then my middle child, with my more recent failed relationship. It's not a failed relationship. It's a great relationship. It's just
Changed
not
relationship.
true.
It's a
A
changed
changed relationship.
relationship.
Yeah. I mean, that was much different. And then, I recognized like, oh, I'm really good at this. Like, I'm sorry to my oldest, but we laugh about it
I'm
now,
sorry to my old.
like,
I'm sorry to that former life parent. I wish you were like me now.
but you know what? Like some of those stresses that she took on, a lot of those difficulties that she had resultant of my inability to like connect with her mother and like not
Sure.
get any, but that is like given her like, I don't want to say a gift, and it's not, I don't mean like I've done this for you. I didn't. I fucked up. But she's also kind of a badass because of it. And I'm not, this isn't a back pat. This is like, oh, please forgive me.
You
But,
know what? It's interesting
you
though.
know,
It's the consequence. And so what I think is
yeah,
so interesting and invaluable about what you're saying is that, we go through our own journeys and who we are in certain
sure.
lives. And that affects other people in our lives at that moment, right? The fact that you look
Absolutely.
back at that younger parent and you're like, bro, I would love to kind of put my hand on your shoulder and kind of whisper in my younger self's ear about how to handle
You're like,
situations
what are
like
you
this,
doing, man? Chill, just chill. Like, it's
right?
okay. Like,
You
everything's
know,
like the end of days. Yes.
yeah,
Yes.
it's
Absolutely.
really interesting, and I would, some might call it wisdom, some might call it maturity, but what's interesting to play out is how your kids are going to be different, not just because of who they are genetically, personality wise, all that stuff, but they're different because of who you were and who you are.
One other thing that connects to this that my friend told me, like the way he said it, like was really impactful to me. And I think he told me that probably a lot of times, but I only just really heard him, I think, more recently, at least with this kid to some degree before it's too late. He's like, I was like, well, they're my kids. Like maybe I was mad about my ex, or she's not letting me see my kids. He's like, Michael, they're not yours. And I was like, what do you mean they're not my kids? They're not yours. They're them. I was like,
Mm.
oh yeah, that's right.
Oh
They're not.
yeah,
Like I'm their guide. Like I'm their dad, and I can like
right.
protect them to adulthood. But their journey, like me wanting my 15, soon to be 16-year-old to continue playing soccer in college because maybe I get like a cheaper tuition or whatever, think like a dad. And she's like, I think I'm done. Like, I don't want to play after high school. I'm like, but we'll play since you are 5. Like, and then, but then you're like, she's like, yeah, I'm just not feeling it. Like, and I don't really want to go to university. I think I want to go to culinary school. And I'm like,
Sure.
this is not true. But it, you know, but it is true. That's but I was raised her, and the lady that I raised her with is also kind of gets it. So we
Uh-huh.
raised her like that to like
Sure.
just be like, this is how I live.
This is your
And then,
journey.
but then they
This
start
this is your
reflecting it
life.
back, and you're like, I wasn't raised like that. You're not allowed to be free.
Right.
But then you're like, oh yeah, you're free. All
You're
right,
free,
good.
right? I mean, the one of the hardest things.
Go not kick soccer balls and be a badass pastry chef. The fuck do I care? Like, go do it. Whatever you want to do, go do it. Just go
That
do it.
that's right. And I think that giving children and young adults that freedom to be who they wanted to be, right? To explore who they wanted to be. I remember being a young adult and I went through a period where I was exploring this part of myself, and it was a part of myself, but it wasn't the whole of myself. And in that exploration, I kind of lost a big part of who I was. So I had to circle
Yeah,
back to it. But you know what? Guess who I wasn't listening to? I wasn't listening to everyone, right? I didn't listen to anyone, right? I was trying to figure out the journey. And, for you to have that kind of maturity with your children to say, look, this is not, you're not living my journey. You're living your journey in the
yeah,
end.
and it's scary because I mean they're idiots, but they're really not. Like they got their mental guide, like their mind, and it's not very experienced, and it doesn't know like the things that you know. Like I kick her ass in trivia, but
Mm-hmm.
also she has this whole like her ness to her. Like she
Mm-hmm.
has this compass that God put there. And you want to talk about spirit? Like, are we eternal beings? Yeah. Then, like, who do I think I am? Spending this segment of life, I can maybe remember my own internally, and not like a memory, but like uh, a gumption for something, or I'm feeling like I should move in that direction. It's me. That's my compass. So she
Mm-hmm.
has one. So my job is to not teach her that my compass, you should follow my compass. Follow your compass. That's my job. Follow it. Trust it. That's your heart. Speak. Let it speak and hear it. Ring loud and clear. And not and then but then it's to be true. But then they let it speak, and then they speak their truth, and you're like, oh, hold her. Wait a minute. No, 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 no. But that's not right. It's not right.
Right.
I mean, there's going to be like boneheaded things are going to think like, well, I'm going to show him and then I'm going to spray paint his car, like, because she's
You're
mad
like,
at board. But I'm like,
maybe not do
no,
that.
you're
Maybe that's what you
no,
feel,
not.
but don't do
But
that.
what I found is the more like we encourage that open thinking, the more she doesn't spray paint the car. You know, the more she's like, I'm like, all right, if that's what you want to do, let's go. I'll go spray paint with you. But if we get one locked up in the Ooskow, I'm gonna get it worse, and you might not get
Right.
your $12. Like, yeah, that's all right. I don't give a shit.
I don't need to
Whatever. And
spray
she's on
paint
to the
my
next
car.
thing. And they're these resilient kind of people. Like the little one's a
Yeah.
whole different story. This
Yeah.
this dude, like,
And it is incredible to see, because you would wonder why, if I myself, and I'm a unique person and I've got my own path and journey, why wouldn't that also be with my kids? But I also think too, it's like the environment you create that opens them up to new ways of living. I mean, one of the things that you had mentioned was that you've lived in a fucking like cool ass super trailer. Like you were
yeah,
showing your kids that there wasn't one way to live. There wasn't even one way to live in a house.
yeah. I still don't live in a house. I never say never. I don't know what's gonna happen, but I'm still like I rent. I rent. There's a backstory to it, but I rent. I'm in like a 1970. I don't know what year, but it's early 70s, like Airstream Argosy, and people are like
Wow.
glamorizing it who are listening, if any, in their heads, like, oh, that's so cool, and that's like a porch or whatever. Listen, you don't want to live where I live. Like you couldn't handle it. It's not this grandiose. Like my ex is in like this cool fifth wheel, like up by Lake Pleasant and whatever. And I mean, like we're like, we had a house with the pool, like the whole thing, and then it just was
Hmm.
like life really just changed, and like I was still like working, and it's not like an inability to like rent a place. It's just like I don't want to like do that right now. Like
Sure.
we're just not on that right now.
Right. And what's amazing is that
Oh,
I think that
mark this word,
I
addiction,
will
because I want to
addict.
talk about it in a minute.
It,
But
I
let's
will.
go on. So you were going to
I'll get
say,
back to it. Well, what I was saying is that that your life is really in your control, right? You can choose not to pay taxes. I mean, there are consequences, but you don't have to pay taxes, right? You don't
I
have
sometimes don't. I'll be honest with you. Like
but you don't have to do anything. I mean, and your choice to say, I want to do this and I want to live this way. Like you said earlier, there's no playbook that you have to follow.
no, there's not. I mean, human, like to me, and then that's even interpretive, like human decency, like that's going to be different everybody, but you have to be your own litmus. Like you have to be your own. Like how would you want the world to be for everybody else if you got to make that choice? Like what would that look like? Like how would you want people to live? Like what would that society be like? How would you rule and like put people in bondage? Like would you live amongst, you're the king. That's it. Would you live like in an Argosy Airstream, like with everybody, and let them kind of do what they wanted as long as they weren't hurting anybody?
Hmm.
What would it look like if you were in charge?
If
And I
you were in
think that
charge.
those are important questions. I think that we need to ask ourselves, and then we have to live in accordance with them. Like some people are probably shitty, and they put you in bondage, and they might even tell you that.
Uh-huh.
Okay, all ways are equal in life. I'm not like you. That's okay.
Right. And that
If
it gets back to that idea that, everyone's faith journey is different and everybody's own journey is different, meaning everybody is different, meaning that there's no one way to live a life. And that includes your children too.
Right. Now think
So
about this for a second. Oh, I'm
do it.
sorry. Go ahead.
Well, no, you're fine. Why don't you? What should I think about?
Well, if you look at the way the world is structured now, and you can look at it globally, you can even look at it like more like in your neck of the woods, like in the US or in California or in San Diego or whatever. Think about how your life is, like how you spend it, and not the way that you are open hearted and accepting of the world as it is and finding joy in it. Is it run the way you would want it to be? Like, would you go to work 5 days a week and take two off and like have all these bills and pay electric bills? Is that how your people would be treated? Because mine wouldn't. My world doesn't look like that at all. Fuck that. None of it. It's all bullshit. I feel like I'm enslaved here. I do. And I think it's bullshit. So my question is, but I'm not the victim. Like, why am I in bondage? Sissy. Like, what did you do to get yourself in bondage with all these other people who are in bondage who aren't the people who are controlling the puppet strings? So now what do? Say it like we're in bondage. They hold the puppet strings. So how do you beat them? How do you make the world more like the way you want it? Well, you can act a certain way and carry yourself with a certain air of grace. But is that really going to do anything to move that needle? No. So the only choice you have is to rise up in consciousness and become a god. Not the God, but a God. And rise up and become fully aware and then see how the game's being played and go back and kick their ass. And that's the only way to do it. The only way.
That is awesome. All right. We'll have to have a part 2, clearly.
I figured I knew this was going to happen. I figured we'd talk until like 2 in the morning
have
and people would be asleep or whatever. All right.
No, people are riveted. So
okay, come on, ask your questions, your follow-up ending questions. I know you have them.
I do. I've got them. So the question is, who do you know that I don't know that I should meet?
I got to give you 2 names for 2 very disparate perspectives. I'm going to give you my company partner for my new venture. His name's Marco Sceglia, but it's like Italian. He says it weird, and you can tell him I told you that. But it's Ceglie. Oh, am I not supposed to say his name? No, he's coming on the show. If you come on the show, I could say. He has a name. So what?
He has a name. Marco, and who else?
And Victor.
All right, you're going to introduce me to those guys.
He's like, no. But yeah, you have to bring them on.
I do. I will. Well, Michael, my Amohotar, I mentioned this to you personally, but I'll mention this again publicly. I love you.
Yeah, I love you too, man. I really do. And thank you for having me. I'm
so glad you could be here. And we're going to definitely do a part 2.
All right, I'll look forward to it. Like maybe get a little experience and then, because I'm the talent now. Yes, it's a joke.
No, you are the talent. No, you're awesome. And I love you. Have a great night. Thank you so much.
All right, man. Be well. Thank you.
Well, right on. Wow. What a conversation. We covered a lot of ground. A hero's journey, what's important in life, changing lives, and for him, even moving on to a place of greater awareness, where it can go above the trees to see what's out there. How many of us are brave enough to do that, to go on that kind of heroic journey? Right? The Joseph Campbell archetype of the hero goes into the wilderness and through adversity and struggle, emerges transformed, comes back to the tribe transformed, and what does he do? He transforms the tribe with new awareness and new insight and a message of something that's bigger and better and greater than what they had before. These are all questions about how you live. Are you living a life in a playbook that someone else wrote for you? Are you writing your own playbook? Are you writing a playbook for your kids and you say, kids, here's the playbook? Or are you letting them write their own playbook? Or maybe it's a blend of both. Maybe we have books that are given to us and we have to work within the confines of, or maybe we write our own from scratch. There are no right or wrong answers unless you're an a-hole, but a lot of questions. And I hope you ask these questions of your friends. I hope you talk to your spouse, your significant others, your parents, your kids, and other friends about these kinds of issues and these kinds of ideas. There are so many things to explore, and that's what we're trying to do with Menfolk Journeys. And if you like what you're listening to and you enjoy this podcast, please go to menfolkjourneys.com, subscribe, tell other people so that they can listen too, and also be a guest. Go to menfolkjourneys.com and book a conversation, because you have a great story to tell, and we'd love to share it. Thank you so much for being a part of Menfolk Journeys. Word bit Falarid.